Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. This is another episode of Wireframe brought to you by Design Systems House. I'm your host, Don Diamato, and today we're going to be talking about minding the gap. And in order to do that, I have a very special guest that's going to be on the show today, who's already on the show. I'm just going to bring her in right now. Kelly Harrop. Kelly, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. I really appreciate it. So let the folks at home know who you are, what you're all about.
Thanks, Donnie. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Harrop. I most recently was a senior software engineer at Intuit, working on our open source software called Player. And I've been working in design systems. I've been working as a software engineer. I've been working as a designer. I've kind of just been all over the place, and I'm happy to be on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm happy to have you on the show as well. And admittedly, here's an important thing here. Kelly's the first female on the show. I've been trying to get a much better range of people on the show. Unfortunately, it's been a whole bunch of white men, and there's a couple of other ones in there too. But Kelly, thank you for being the first female on the show. Later this week, we'll also have Elise Holiday on the show. So it's a Woman Week on Wireframe this week. It's just all the W's. I love it. So when you submitted to speak over here, actually, I did ping Kelly in particular, but of course, asking exactly what we want to talk about. We're talking about the undocumented gap in design systems. So tell us a little bit more, the audience and me, of course, about what you're talking about when we have this gap in design systems.
Yeah, so from my experience, what I've seen so far and what's not really talked about that much is not really talking about state. Now, when I say state, there are lots of different ways you can interpret that. And I mean them all. I mean,
Oh my God.
something as simple as a component state, like hover, active, disable, the traditional states of a component. There's also an element of state as validation. So, when you're writing and you're typing out your email and there's a little error that pops up because you haven't finished putting like the little @.com, and I'm like, stop it, it's not an error yet. Like, let me finish my thought. So validation is also a great one. And then the thing that I really wanted to talk about mostly is state as part of a state machine. And for those folks who aren't really sure what I'm talking about, a state machine is essentially like a list of logic, like a flow that kind of dictates what the user experience is based on lots of different conditions. Those conditions could be a user error. It could be a system error. It could be you clicked on a button and you filled out a certain field a certain way. So then something happens next, and you're not really sure what happens next, but that's also part of the whole state, part of the whole story, part of the whole user experience. So I work on Player. So Player is an Intuit open source project. It's a framework. And essentially what it is it's a semantic server-side rendering framework. And it TLDR, it renders stuff on the screen. So that's what it does. There's lots of different elements that are part of that because nothing can ever be simple. Everything has to be like 5 layers deep of complexity. Of course.
It's called job security, of course, right? Until it's not. My goodness, yeah. So about now, state machine immediately makes me triggered, and I say that in a way because I don't understand state machine. Every time I hear state machine, I'm like, oh God, this sounds like a sort of what's it called? Computer term. And I'm going to say computer term because I'm not a computer scientist here, but can you break down what a state machine is for a layperson? I'm going to put myself as a layperson here, what that's all about. So maybe hopefully it's not scary.
Yeah, you can kind of think of it as a giant flow chart.
Okay.
And there are different technologies out there that kind of help visualize that. I think like X State's one of them. Uh, and really, what's helpful is thinking of it as you can think of it as like a navigation system. There are different types of state machines, but the way that I think of it is primarily through navigation. So having that kind of, oh, if I put this logic of when they finish with this flow of screens, what happens next? What's the next action? Um, those definitions kind of tell that story. So it really gets into, is this an error? Like if error, what screen's going to show up next? If
Mm-hmm.
success, you have your traditional states logic there. And I think it's important that when we're thinking of design flows, you have your end-to-end flows in Figma and you're prototyping them out. There's only so much you can communicate there. There's only so many like clicks and, suddenly you have just like a bunch of crazy like blue lines pointing to a million frames. And I think what we're lacking here is some type of way to quickly understand what's next. What are the different options? And I think when you're using something like Figma, you're kind of trapped in this design visual ecosystem. And really having that stuff diagrammed out can be super helpful. And programs like I've been using Mermaid personally. Mermaid's a great flowchart tool. And what's nice about that is when you're using AI AI can hook up to Mermaid. So usually when I'm working on something complex, I can actually ask AI, hey, can you make me a mermaid chart of how this experience works? And it'll produce something that I can drop into GitHub or I can drop into Astro. Like there are all types of tools that render these charts out of this mermaid. It looks like a JSON. It's not JSON, but it's like a YAML, some type of file. And it will visualize these decisions. And I think that's been so impactful for teams to understand, what they're supporting, but also troubleshooting, right? Like you suddenly have a visual hierarchy of what kind of decisions users are making that you might not even fully grasp, so you see it yourself.
Yeah. No, I thank you for explaining that, and it makes it a lot easier, at least for me, to kind of understand it because I understand a flowchart, like a flowchart. I get. Okay, that's good. A state machine just sounds so much more like scary to me. It's just like, oh, there's a big machine coming, grabbing me or something. I don't know. I don't know. I guess my imagination's going wild. So I think the next question I have there is, and this is a problem that I've had when considering states, and I see this also as a problem for designers although as well. How do you enumerate all of the states that are going to be appropriate for the area that you're working on? And I'm saying area is a very loose term because there's, like you mentioned earlier, there's lots of different states and lots of different places. So how could you be sure that you have full coverage?
That's a great question. I think there are a few different areas that you could tackle with that. I think the first one that comes top of mind is solid visual regression testing. And for that, I think that gives you a peace of mind of what are users actually seeing, because there are different places and areas that states can fail that you might not capture from just a pure logic standpoint, having that confirmation of the visual. Mostly when I see things failing, it can be an issue with how maybe like content is rendered. Maybe there's like a variable that didn't get replaced by something. So I see that quite frequently when you see like, brackets name, like why did that not transform correctly? So getting that confirmation as part of your pipeline has been really valuable. I also think when you're bringing up, what do you not know, that can be challenging. I think having like a template that you work through with your team, both designers and engineers, is part of that process. So do we have system error designs and logic? Do we have user error design and logic? Do we have those things in place? And from what I can tell, I think that some of that stuff is documented, but people aren't finding it. And I think that's a gap where teams are producing so many valuable artifacts and are just getting lost in the atmosphere. And that's where I think tools like MCPs leaning more into what your AI can monitor and access is a significant investment. And I know that from my experience, some of that stuff you would think is available across all your, Slack and uh, Figma and Cursor and all these different tools. You think that they have all the same access, but you'd be surprised that they don't. So just making sure that you can leverage these tools consistently across these different layers is, I think, a game changer, because what you don't want to have happen is them fighting over what's true and what's not true, because that actually can cause more churn. So just because you have access to these AI tools doesn't mean you're going to reduce support. It can actually sometimes backfire. So just having the accuracy down with these tools, I think, is part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So obviously a lot of tooling that's going to help in there, which I'm pulling out of there for sure. The documentation piece is interesting, and I want to touch upon that because in this new world of MCP, which I've earlier on was saying that documentation is dead. No one's reading docs, right? It's just like no one wants to. No one has the time. No one has the foresight to even navigate to that page that had to find the doc and match their IA and all that stuff. So this MCP ecosystem is so much more powerful now that basically does all of the stuff that we would expect a user to do in the first place to understand what they need to do, and then apply it to the thing, right? Whatever the thing is. Now, is there a world? I'm going to take this to the other side of this conversation, because the question I just asked was, how do you know you have all the states? Is there a world, and this goes along with the documentation piece, that you have too much, right? Too much documentation, too many states. Like, is it possible to have too much and over-index on something where a user, a peer gets confused, or even the MCP, the agent, gets confused? Have you had any experience with that at all?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I can think of related to this is deprecation. Like, how do you deprecate something so that systems aren't leveraging that old, outdated knowledge? I think having things like migration documentation is important in that case. So having a dedicated, either like a migration skill or some type of, as simple as like a markdown file, can actually do wonders for something like that, especially when it comes to versioning. So if you have that as part of maybe like your change log, that can tie in easily, and then you can include that as a reference point when there's like a source that's included in the answer. When you talked about like too much noise, too much documentation, I totally hear you. I think a lot of us are moving away from documentation sites. We're living now like in the code. I'll say a few things about that. I still think there's some value in having some type of online presence. Now, I think a lot of that can be automated so that teams aren't having to manually keep that up to date as they used to have to do. And what I've personally done is I've tried to blend code automation with AI. So infer what you can with like basic code logic that you can, use regex or things, something that can infer and get answers that way. And then blending in AI assisted comments or AI assisted skills or a markdown file of that nature, so that when you're generating these documentation pages, it's this like hybrid, right? You have like this confident code portion that works because it's just literally looking at the code and generating stuff. And then you kind of have an assistant that's filling out the other parts that it's inferring based on tests, based on the logic itself. Maybe you have good well, hopefully you have good TypeScript documentation and
Let's hope
JS
so.
docs.
Mhm.
One can only hope. Um, and using the tools that we've all been kind of using along the way, right? Like we have these great tools. We have TS docs. We have all these things that I think only can get better as we move on to these tools that are looking at that already, right? And then they can make their own summaries and easy to read things that hopefully are correct, because maybe the comments need to be better. Like maybe that would be the issue where I could see some deviation from the intent. But I think just having that like better core, you have better core code, better comments already, non-AI written comments, comments that you're writing because you know what you're trying to do, can help facilitate that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I'm going to touch upon the last thing about that you said about the non-AI written comments, because what we're seeing is a lot of AI written stuff, just in general, right? You have these organizations out there that are basically aligning metrics to see how much, code is written by AI. We had even the news about Meta, where AI, we're trying to see what the employees are doing, and if they're using AI, if they're what they're doing at all. So, you know, how are folks meant to balance the human parts of what we're doing with the agentic parts that are unfortunately being pressed upon us? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a tough battle. I'm known around my parts. I'm known as the AI power user. So,
All right.
I mean, I was an early adopter. I was actually looking at some. Uh, I was looking at some old end of year goals of mine from I think like a couple of years back, and
Okay.
I was reading and I said I'm going to use AI more in my workflow, and I go, wow, that was that was 2 years ago, and
Oh my
now
God.
look where we are today. Uh, I I I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of slop. There's a
Yeah.
lot of slop.
Yeah.
We're in the midst of slop everywhere, and where I have found success is using AI mostly as a diagnostic tool,
Hmm.
because it can do a lot of simulations. It can do anything that I would have had to manually do across like many different repos, or like run a script, or do something very manual and tedious. That's where I tend to really leverage AI. I use it to get benchmarks when I'm working on something and someone goes, what are the performance gains? I'm like, I don't know. um, so, being able to run, these simulations and get actual numbers of like build times and that stuff is great. I love it.
Yeah.
Using it to create unit tests, also love it.
Hmm.
I think it's, speaking of unit tests, I've heard at some places where the new approach is all you do is write unit tests, and
Hmm.
then AI kind of goes backwards and writes the actual code for you. And I was like, I mean, isn't that kind of like, it's like test driven development, but
Right.
it's AI test driven development. And I know from like a lot of folks are not happy with that. Like it's kind of soul sucking in that way. It's like we're just writing tests.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about, because the other thing that we've seen a little bit of is this idea of spec-driven development, right? Where you're not even writing tests necessarily, you're writing what the thing's supposed to do, and be, very deliberate about what that's supposed to be, right? And I even saw, I think in some conference recently, that apparently that's even wrong, where we're supposed to be doing something else instead, which is, I think it was like harness engineering, which is like everything around it that you're supposed to be building. It's just like it changes so often about what we're supposed to be doing, and these outputs is just overwhelming sometimes. Um, so yeah, I could definitely get some of the anxiety behind, oh, I don't want to be writing tests. I didn't sign up to be writing tests. And actually, let's talk about that, because as we're both design engineers, or at least I guess we associate with that title. You run a podcast with Adekunle called Code and Pixels, which is all about design engineering. So tell me about how you, I want to know about the feeling here, because from at least what I used to do is I used to make these prototypes, and these prototypes were very clearly not meant to be directly shoved into production, right? And what we're seeing now is that now the bar has been lowered, or the fence has been lowered in two different ways, where you have the fence lowered from the ability to create these prototypes, but you also have the quality lowered, because now those prototypes are winding up in production because people don't know better. So what is your feeling behind all of this?
So I think there's a lot of power with being able to say, hey, use this design system to create this experience, right? And I think about it, going back to the topic at hand of state and variance
Mhm.
and logic around the system, right? Like design system isn't just components; it's the whole logic behind everything. It's about knowing what, in this scenario, you're going to like. These are the things that should be used in this experience. Something that I think about often is we have all these building blocks and things like we have, maybe there's like an example is like maybe you have like a modal, and maybe that modal has three defined sizes, small, medium, large, to keep it simple. um, and what I've learned is when you have all these building blocks just thrown into the system, like AI might not necessarily know which one to use in a given uh, case. So maybe the small one is always on like a mobile device, or maybe there's like this concept of like a full size modal, right? Like it's flexible and it's a percentage based thing versus pixel based. So I think there is, when we're thinking about like AI building these prototypes and how they're working with design systems and UI elements, what I see a lot is there's like pieces there that kind of look right, but then they kind of fall apart when you're trying to do like a full end to end, because it doesn't know. Like it doesn't know what outside of the pieces that you give it, it doesn't know. Um, I think there are more mature teams kind of using AI where maybe they have skills that can kind of talk to the AI to let it know what the parameters are, like the guardrails for what can be used. But as far as like prototyping, I mean, I'm old school. Maybe this is like aging me, but I'm old school. Like I like just like give me code sandbox or a code pen,
Hell yeah.
and let me just write it in the thing, and let me just see what feels right. Like there's something, maybe it's nostalgia, I don't know, but there's something like magical about writing something in, just writing something and then like seeing something change. Um, and I feel like we're losing that magic.
Yeah, there's definitely something powerful of I mean, I remember when I started doing this stuff and being able to just like, write a little bit of code in Notepad. That's back in the, really dating myself. And having a change on a web page, and the web page was something that everybody in the world could see. Like that's huge. And now I think many of us in the industry, of course, take it for granted because it's just so easy now for us to just make something happen that way. And in some cases, we don't even touch the keyboard, right? People are just using like whisper flow and just like saying, make the thing blue, and it's just all suddenly blue,
That'll
So
be 50,000 tokens.
yeah, we'll get lots of tokens, make sure just to make the thing blue. I mean, that's a really good point about this thing too, because in the industry that we're in and what we're working on, a lot of these things that are generating like designs, you have to use the agent in order to make changes, right? You have no ability or functionality from the UI to make changes. And a lot of these like website builders that are out there that people are trying to make changes on, just trying to center the text, you have to actually spend tokens to center text. That's wild. That's wild. You could do it in a couple of keystrokes for us that know what we're doing. You know, I think the other thing that I heard on the conference last week was about AI amplifying. So, like, basically saying that if you are bad at something, it's going to amplify the bad that you are in the thing. If you're good at something, it'll amplify the good that you're having in it. So, if you are good at design engineering, like I believe that you are, then it'll amplify, you know, the good that you're doing and all the insight that you're providing with these tools and things of that nature. So I think there's some good and bad basically from the people that are using it. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the compliment. I try.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job out here.
But like going back to the example, like making a button blue, right? Like
Hmm.
if you know a little bit about, CSS and like how it's plugged in, like you can make that change yourself. You don't, not every
Right.
request needs to be a token. And I almost feel we're starting to get into that gray space of like, well, can I like, should I do this? Like,
Yes.
can I slash should I, or do I make my robot do this task for me?
Hmm.
And it's dangerous because sometimes you just get into that mindset of, well, I don't know where the file is. I can't be bothered with learning what variable is controlling this thing. And
Hmm.
you kind of like sit back, and I think that's a dangerous slide of at what point do like what at what point do we start making our own decisions, or we're just letting AI create our CSS variable names now? Like
Oh God,
what are we controlling at this point?
I hope not. Goodness gracious, no, please. You know, the thing that I think maybe a part of this is, and this is something that I felt a while back, is that front end development has gotten too complex, right? I think that's an artifact of this whole thing is that like Kelly and I were talking about Astro before the show and how we both love Astro.
Mhm.
And Astro, if you know Astro, it is fundamentally the web back when we're okay. I'm going to date both of ourselves now. How we used to work on the web, right? It was HTML and CSS, a little bit of JavaScript here and there, but ultimately we're making static pages, a couple little interactions here and there, but ultimately that kind of experience is what Astro kind of like embodies a little bit, right? And there's very little complexity, I believe, in that system. Where if you look at modern web development in lots of places, you'd have this huge amount of complexity. You need middleware and auth and database connections and all this other stuff that you're just like, well, I just want to render some HTML on the page and make it look nice. Like, why do we have to make it so crazy? So I think that's probably something to do with it, right? Where now I just can't be bothered by the amount of complexity we've added to front end. I just want to get past it all and write my CSS already. Do you feel similar?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel you mentioned like I feel like I've gone through so many different crazes.
Hmm.
I've tried out Gatsby, I've tried out Next, and as you mentioned, like I'm now an Astro fangirl.
Hell yeah.
I love Astro, use it at work, and I'm probably going to use it to revamp my portfolio now. But like Donnie said, like I like the simplicity, but also it's not overly simple.
Right.
I can customize it.
Yes.
It gives me enough to be dangerous.
Yes.
And really, isn't that all we're asking for, is to be dangerous at this point?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So I want to talk about something as well, and this is the moment where I also want to let you know that Kelly said that she's an open book about this particular topic. So, but at any point you tell me that I'm crossing bounds, you tell me to shut the fuck up. All right, no problem. But the topic that I want to bring up, which is fairly timely to have her on the show, is that Kelly was recently laid off at the large layoff that Intuit had. And she worked at Intuit for many years. She'll tell you how many years, of course, that was. But I want to get your perspective on this very fresh, life-changing moment for you. You know, how do you feel? What's going on? Just what do you got for me in that kind of realm there, or for the audience?
Yeah. So I was at Intuit for almost 8 years. Um, and as I mentioned at the start of the show, I've been in multiple different roles. design, UX/design engineering, software engineering. Been across lots of different teams, lots of different types of focus. And I guess what I'm feeling is like, what do I do? What do I do now? Because my experience is so like completely different in each of the roles that I've been in, but also the same in a strange way. And I think it's like one of those opportunities to like do something new and fresh. But also, I'm sad because obviously I was passionate about the work that I was doing with our team, and also sad for the amazing folks that were also laid off. As Donnie mentioned, it was a 17% of our workforce was part of the layoffs. So 3,000 other folks, and very talented bunch of people. I think what I'm feeling is also touched. I've had a lot of folks, and Don included, reaching out to me during this time. And it's one of those things where I just thought I would kind of like go into like the dark corner and kind of like shut the blinds and like cry a little bit. But I think I'm still in that denial, a little bit of denial, like, oh no, like, and like this morning, like Monday was a holiday, but like this morning I woke up and was like, all right, and then I went, oh, like there's no there's no sign on, there's no password that I need to remember. And I think so today, if you're like, well, what did you do today, Kelly? So today I spent most of it just setting up my personal machine. I installed Node, installed
Node.
Node, the classics, Homebrew, all of those things. And just trying to get a sense of having like my own like personal setup and cracking open my portfolio that's accumulated a lot of cobwebs and dust over the past few years.
Okay. So one of the things that I'm also fearful of layoffs. I have a day job as well, and I'm also fearful of layoffs, mostly because of the things that I'm seeing around me. Right, you see all these companies out there, big and small, announcing layoffs, or even if they don't announce layoffs. I have peers of mine that I see on LinkedIn that all of a sudden, hey, I got laid off, etc. And I know, and the unfortunate reality is that a person at a company is a number on a spreadsheet somewhere. Right? It's not about you in particular, about how you are as a person. It's really about the metrics that they are tracking, whatever the metrics they are, and saying, okay, based on these numbers, this individual needs to go. So like I'm also fearful of this stuff. So like in your next steps, you mentioned the portfolio piece in there, but and this is also very fresh, right? So maybe you haven't thought about this yet because it is very shocking. I would assume. I mean, I've had to leave jobs before, also in a similar way. But other than the portfolio, what next steps are you taking? Are you taking it easy? Are you stressed the hell out? Like, what are you? How are you getting through these steps, if you even call it getting through? Like, these moments that you're taking right now, what is that for you?
It is it feels like it's based on the hour at this point.
Okay.
I think for me personally, it's the lack of knowing what to do next. Like, do I want to be a designer? Do I want to be an engineer? Do I want to do design engineering? Do I want to move over more to like management? Like, what do I do? And each pivot, if you can call it that, pivot's too strong a word here, but each whimsy that I think through, I'm like, well, I need to do X, Y, and Z if I want to be successful at this. So, for example, design. All right, well, I need a design portfolio, or I want to do design engineering. So I need like a design engineering portfolio. So I have all these different, it's all swimming in my head, but all these different buckets of things to show, hey, I actually know how to do these things. And here is like a walkthrough of my brain on how I would do. But they're also different, right? Like
Mhm.
a design portfolio is very different from design engineering portfolio, which is different
Yes.
from a software engineering portfolio. And then like, what if I want to do like more of a management style thing? Well, then I have to have more, obviously, more management types of numbers and outcomes and scenarios and things like that to talk through. So I'm a little overwhelmed
Okay.
with that, but I think it's more at this point, I'm trying to take it easy,
Mm,
but not too easy.
mm,
I'm trying to have at least a few goals, a few daily goals to like ground myself. So I'm not just like eating Cheetos and playing Overwatch all day. Well,
mm.
not bad combination because I'm a console player and that would be a disaster for my controller. But I'm trying to like have this like very focused, almost like treating it like, like a job, like work.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah.
trying to have a sense of like, here are these things I've generated, these artifacts, whatever that might be,
Mhm.
um, and try and find opportunities that align with here's what I got and here's what I can do. So that's kind of, so again, still fresh.
Yeah.
This is my first official week, kind of like figuring things out, but that's kind of the way I'm approaching it.
Okay. That sounds great. And I think there's something really nice about the optimism there. But here's where I'm gonna
Feel
make
my
make
optimism.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna see what happens here. So again, working off of my own like feelings about the idea of this thing, fears, uncertainties, and doubts. There's lots of people now between the Intuit layoff, the Meta layoff, other layoffs that have been there, people that are trying to get into the industry. All it's saturated with talent now. How do you feel about, you know, the hiring process, right? I think, I imagine, I don't know what kind of interviewing you did while you were interviewed, if you did any interviewing while you were there, but you know, there's people who have been interviewing for a long time, right? Like I think Peter was on the show a couple months back. I think he's been interviewing for like a year or two, right, with very little fruitfulness out of there. Crossing my fingers for you there, Peter. And very talented, right? He was running the show over at Venmo effectively from the design system. So how are you do you have any thoughts about that, about the fears and uncertainties of the industry as a whole, and how you think that you might be able to come out on top somehow?
I have done a bunch of internal mobility. So I've had to do interviews because each role
Mm.
required like a full interview. I
Oh,
didn't get
really?
to just transfer. I had to interview for each role, like an external hire for each of these positions.
Really? That's
Yeah,
fascinating. I've never actually heard that before.
yeah, a full panel and going through the whole process.
Okay.
Um, so thankfully, I've had that experience. I think I agree with what you're saying. It's a hard, it's a tough market out there. And I'm very realistic about how tough it is. I think for me, I tend to I take feedback very seriously.
Mm,
Constructive feedback. I think it's all important, and I think I think playing into my strengths while recognizing my weaknesses is how I stay kind of positive.
mhm,
Uh, so I think I have a lot of stories. I'm a big storyteller. So my ability to just talk through whether it's something our team has done or talking through user experience, I think communication is where I kind of excel. And so I want to use that as a mechanism to improve the skills that I'm lacking. I think right now I'm going to admit I am very reliant on AI these days
mhm.
because I'm terrible at remembering some coding stuff. Like I've never been good at that. I've always
Okay.
had to like, it's always been Stack Overflow
Mhm.
or whatever the tool is, like answer questions. And I'm so happy I have AI now because I can be like, all right, is it splice or is it
Oh my
slides or is
God.
it pop or is it what the heck is I never remember that stuff. And yet when we
Yeah.
go to these like technical interviews, I'm just like, I don't freaking remember. Like
Mm,
that's something I would ask AI to do, like, or
right.
I'd Google it. And so I think like stuff like that, like I probably need like a little bit of a refresher, or some type of cheat sheet type of
Mhm,
thing.
mhm.
It's like Kelly's common. forget forget things she forgets.
Hmm.
And things like how to do like a simple filter. Like I don't remember that.
Okay.
It's usually pre-filled. Like you're doing like you're in your editor, and it's like you do dot map, and it fills out. It's like it does all the work for you. So I think when it comes to like technical interviews, like that's the part that just seems so inauthentic now, like
Right.
as part of the hiring flow, because so many people use AI. Like who's writing these things from scratch these days?
True, true. But I mean, now here's the double-edged sword at this point, because we earlier talked about the feeling of being able to write it yourself, right? And that felt really good about being able to write it yourself. But then there's also the thing that you just said is like, who's writing it themselves these days, right? And I think it certainly matters about context, right? So, from years ago, even before AI, it was kind of silly to rewrite an algorithm that was already on NPM. It's like, why would I rewrite this? We already have the resource out there. Why would I possibly want to, or we thought that this was going to be better than anything else that's out there, right? So, the hiring, I guess, loop and the interviews that you would have just back in the day were sometimes ridiculous. Sometimes it was just bullshit, and someone wanted to make them feel better because they knew better than you did, and make you feel awful about it. I mean, I'm saying that from a particular experience because they would love to put a CSS expert into a JavaScript interview and watch them squirm. Like that's what people love doing, especially you full stack engineers out there. Um, but these days with AI, when I interview people, the way that I hope, and I hope other people kind of do this too, is to allow them to use AI. These interviews that don't allow you to use AI and then all of a sudden test you on the metrics of you using AI on the job is the same as you would test me on how to reverse an array on the interview, and then tell me that I had to put these two boxes next to each other, like separate things, right? So I would love to see interviews get closer and closer to the actual job, and I think nowadays the best way of doing that is saying, yeah, use AI. Let me see how you use AI and what kind of questions. Like, you're not just going to accept whatever bullshit AI just spits out at you. I want to see what your process is with what is effectively this coworker that you're going to be working with, this intern, so to speak, and see what it generates, and see if it has quality behind it, if the performance is there, any other considerations that I would particularly consider without me having to physically write the code, right? So that's what I'm hoping people are moving toward these days, as opposed to, again, the code monkey stuff that's out there, right?
I mean, I would love a take home. Like, give me a take
Hmm.
home anytime. Like, I feel like that's not, at least from what I've seen, like that's not the norm anymore. Like, so many teams want to see like live coding.
Yeah, but
Which
like, why? Like, what satisfaction do you get watching someone code? Right, I agree with you. I think you're right about like the take home stuff. Is that before take homes used to, I think for a lot of people, be very anxiety driven. Like, oh, why am I doing work for you, right? When I'm supposed to have this 1 hour to do this one thing to show you I
Mhm,
can do the thing. But I think you're honestly really right about, let me give me the take home. I'll do the take home with AI because it's no big deal, right?
mhm.
And then send it to you, and you tell me, or you have your AI tell me, because we know what's going to go on.
Have your AI talk to my
Yeah,
AI.
exactly. We'll do lunch. Um, and that's basically what we're at now, right? Is basically like, okay, let's set aside my time. So, because the take home, I think, is really important there, because no one's watching you. I think there's a pressure in the watching that people have
Oh,
anxiety about,
absolutely.
right? Where the
Absolutely.
take home removes that.
Mhm,
So I agree with you. Take home these days is better as long as the time is allotted, right?
mhm.
Yeah,
And it's not, free work. Like have it
right.
not be, redesign our marketing page or something like for the company itself.
Right, right. Yeah, hopefully, I mean, man, I had an idea back in the day about like trying to improve the way that they hire us, right? Design engineering hiring is the worst fucking thing on the face of the planet, right? Because it aligns with the ladder, right, which doesn't exist, right? Either the ladder's in engineering or it's in design, or
Oh, don't
at
get me
best.
started about that.
Oh my God, yeah, it's that's its own a show that Kelly and I will have to do later on. But the thing about the hiring, of course, is it's bad enough trying to hire a front end engineer these days, right? Because the full stack engineers that are hiring you, they aren't asking the right questions. But now, because you're a design engineer, they want to put designers in the room and they want to put engineers in the room. Hopefully, it's different rooms. Hopefully, it's not the same room. Holy shit. Um, but I mean, do you have any experience? I mean, you said that you did some hiring rounds internally. What did it look like for you back then in terms of like the design engineering stuff?
So it's been a hot minute.
Hmm.
When I first got hired, it was a design role. So it was, I want to say, 3 designers and a front end engineer, just to kind of have that balance of like, can they talk through obviously design, but also do they have enough grounding to be able to discuss some implementation details and at least be aware of the process and how when a designer would work effectively with an engineer. Really good balance for that role.
Hmm.
And then as I progressed, uh, I mean progress is the wrong word here because like I think it's all just different. But as I changed roles, it definitely became more engineering, like
Mm.
mostly engineering in the panel that I spoke to. Um, and obviously my last role was a software engineer, so there were 0 designers in that one, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But it makes me kind of like be like, well, I don't want to be purely in the software engineering moving forward. Like I miss design, I miss the visuals, I miss not looking. I mean, at this point, I don't remember the last time I looked at, a window. I've been living in the terminal
Mm.
for the past couple years, just because the terminal is where so much of the work that I did was shown. It's
Hmm.
all like terminal commands and seeing, files produced, and it's very not in. It's not. I want to look at a browser again. So I'm looking. I just want to look at it. I just if you Johnny, if you ask me like what am I look, I'm looking for a role where I get to like look at a browser like at least occasionally.
She wants to get out of the
Want to
matrix.
get out of the
Get
terminal.
her out of the matrix. She wants to see butterflies and
I'm
blue
done with the
skies
ones
again.
and zeros. Give me a button and a drop down, please.
Yes, let's do that. Let's go ahead and ship one of those to Kelly immediately. She wants it and she needs it.
But it's.
Um,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed it. I just there's we all have different preferences and things we enjoy, and I know I enjoy that blend of design. I enjoy being a design engineer. Like
yeah,
that's where I want to
yeah.
kind of be.
Yeah. So I've actually personally been battling with it a little bit as well. Because I've said on the show before that I want to transition into model behavior design. And model behavior design is really all about the content, the text, the conversation that you're happening. There's very little graphical user interface that's going on in this particular practice. And I'm trying to balance that because I've been doing, I'll call it artistic stuff for a really long time in my life. But I've also recognized that a lot of it is grounded on user experience and getting the feeling that the user is having a good time with the stuff that I build. And with this new ecosystem, this new way of experiencing uh, applications and goal achieving with being through a conversation, there's very little graphical user interface in there at this point. I mean, the way that I think about it is how we used to like call for a taxi, right? And the interface was you speaking into the phone and being on the other person, and the other person would make a phone call to a taxi somewhere, and you get a taxi at your house. And then we went to this kind of Uber model where
Mhm.
now you have this interface that you got to fuck around with and be like, what the fuck's going on in this interface? I just want a car at my house, right? At a very, at a inexpensive price. So now that there's a shift happening effectively where we're almost going back to the phone call where there's no graphical user interface any longer, right? You could whisper
Ooh.
flow to AI potentially, and then, I don't know, prediction market a car to your house, right? It's just like wild, the full circle that's come from the whole thing, where the user interface that we used to work on and love and have our careers in. I
Mhm.
mean, built this house with pixels
With the
effectively.
pixels, with code and pixels, man.
Code and pixels, yes. There's the plug for the show coming up right there. But yeah, it's wild that it's coming all the way kind of back into the terminal, and I think I think right, there's an appetite for people like us that have been doing this for a long time to at least keep one foot in the
Mhm.
window, right?
In the
In
window, yes, one foot in the
one
window.
foot in the window of the house that we built, right? I think that's what we're talking about. But any last thoughts on that, or our topics in general here?
No, you touched on a point where you were saying like you want users to enjoy
Yeah.
what we've built, right? And I think that's getting lost right now. Like we built more in the past few years than like any point before. Like we're using AI, we're like maximizing features being shipped. But I feel like so many people don't know what happens when like it just goes out into the universe. And then like, you might have some like social media, maybe some feedback on something, but it's very rare it's based on specifically the thing that you shipped yourself.
Hmm.
And that makes it hard. Like at the end, like, did I do a good job? Do they like this? Was it easy? Like, and I know and like, I used to like we used to have UX researchers, and this was their job to get this user feedback.
Right.
And I don't see those roles that much anymore. I think a lot of it's either to AI or it's refunded into a different types of roles. But that's something that I think it's sad. Like investing so much into user experience and then not really knowing what happens after that is it makes it harder both for your portfolio when you're trying to get outcomes. It makes it harder from like a day to day to know like are we moving the needle? Like was this and it's not just about I feel like there's so much emphasis on revenue, which is important. Like revenue is important,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
are they like did they enjoy their experience? Like do we know anymore as designers, as engineers? Like I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the metrics there, you would like to think that if the user enjoyed the experience, they will whip out their credit card, right, and pay for the fucking
Hey
experience.
Donnie
Right, and
directly.
there's where the money is. If they don't fucking like the experience, then they're gonna take their credit card away, and they're gonna fucking leave, and then your revenue's gonna go shit, right? But I think that there's probably this investor fucking problem that's in there, and a whole bunch of like billionaires at the top playing games, thinking they know what users are, right? So yeah, it's hard for us who I think work in this space that have a great deal of empathy for users to
Mhm.
see some of the behavior out there and just have this feeling that this could all be so much better,
Mhm.
right? And but I hope, Kelly, that your next role, you are the one that makes it all better.
Thanks, Donnie.
And I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. So we're coming to close to the end of the show over here. I want you, Kelly, to have an opportunity to plug anything that's going on with you. Of course, hire Kelly. I'm just going to plug her right now, real quick. Hire Kelly for her next role. Once she figures out exactly the direction that she wants to go, but when she does, she'll be great for it. But go ahead, Kelly. Let the people know what's going on there. What you want to plug?
Thanks. Yeah, I want to shout out obviously all the folks that are impacted by the layoffs, but into and Meta. It was like the same day.
Yeah.
All those wonderful folks. Shout out my team, of course. That Player 1.0 is in. There's a canary out, and it'll eventually be a thing. So the first major release of Player, still hyped for that. Adekunle, my co-host for Code and Pixels, codeandpixels.fm is our podcast. Check it out. We're trying to be more consistent, but we have lots of episodes. And obviously, Donnie, thank you so much for having me on the show. This has been fun. Thank you.
Great, great. Yes, it has been fun. I thank you for being on the show as well, Kelly. And of course, thank you out there for being a part of the show. Let me just go ahead and click my buttons over here. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching the show. Before you go, please help out the show by smashing the like and subscribe button just to get notified the next time that we go live. And feel free to continue the conversation on the official Design Systems Discord by visiting discord.ds.house. There it is on the bottom. Play nice in those comments, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye.